20,000 ringgit. Arbitrarily, that is a lot of money and you can do a lot with that. But when you break it over an automotive loan, your down payment only increases by about 2,000 ringgit, your monthly installments by less than 200 ringgit a month, and then you add the 5-year unlimited mileage warranty and the little things that make one car better than the other, and suddenly 20,000 ringgit doesn't seem like that big of a deal. See, that's the thought process that UMW Toyota wants you to follow. So you'll put a down payment on the Toyota Veloz as opposed to that other 7-seater MPV that's also made in Rawang. Now, in this review, we're going to tell you whether or not this car justifies its price premium, or if you're better off being pragmatic and going with the locally branded product instead. And before we get into that, be sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Now, before we get into the review, we need to cover a few basics. Yes, the Toyota Veloz is ultimately a dressed up version of the Perodua Alza. In fact, it's built on the same production line. It uses the same engine, the same chassis, it has the same technology. Genuinely, not much here has changed. The basic hardware is the same, but the devil is in the details. Now, looks are subjective, but the Toyota Veloz has a slightly more aggressive face with a larger downturn grille, more chrome accents, slightly reprofiled headlights with the same adaptive high beam, progressive indicators, and you have daytime running lights down here. Yes, no fog lights. Now, again, things are subjective, so I'm going to reserve my comments for a little bit later. You'll also notice that this car sports a two-tone look to it, with a split right here, which I must say isn't really done with the cleanest paint line in the world. You also have this chrome strip which starts at the grille and goes very nicely into the bottom of the windows, and it goes all the way to the rearmost pillar, which I think is a very neat look. You also get larger dual-tone alloy wheels on the Veloz compared to the Alza, although they do actually run the same Toyo Proxus tyres, of course in a different size lah. And then you also get functional roof rails up here, which I believe can carry up to 100 kilograms, and again, with this black bodywork on the top, it melds very neatly into this chrome garnish which ends about here. The other, or rather the only other, notable thing about this car is that the Veloz has this weird rear wheel arch garnish thing that makes it about a millimeter wider at best. I'm actually not very sure why this is here. I think it doesn't really make much of a design difference, but I suspect that it's one of those things where when you look at it at a distance, it makes the car look a little bit different. And at the rear, it's much the same story. The bumper is slightly different with the same sort of contrasting garnish down here to match the front. Although the biggest change is the fact that one, you have Veloz written across and there's a Toyota badge because it's a Toyota, and you have a light bar that actually stretches all the way across, intersected only by the Toyota badge. Now, this might seem very minor to you, but to me, it really does make the Veloz stand out, especially at night. So if you are looking at this because it's different, because 8 of your neighbors have an Alza, this will be a demonstration of your extra 20k. Now, because they are ultimately the same car, it means that in terms of practicality, they are the same as well. So with all 7 seats deployed, you can see that there is a little bit of space in here. It's less than what you get in, say, an Axia, for example, but it is definitely a big improvement over the Toyota Avanza that this replaces, and of course the first generation Perodua Alza. So you can actually put a little bit of things in here. I can attest that a family of 5 can get a 2 weeks worth of groceries in here without much issue, without having to fold the rear seats flat. Although of course, if you do want to fold the rear seats, you just pull this tab, they recline, and they fall flat into the floor. It may not seem flat to you because this car has an accessory pack boot liner, but this bay is flat, and there are even these little flaps to make sure nothing falls into the cracks, which I think is intelligent design details. Now, Toyota again will continue to try and justify the price premium on the inside. You'll be greeted by a slightly different interior color scheme which integrates these lighter panels as well as soft touch material, specifically right here. This is nowhere else. I'm also very glad that Toyota has put in the Veloz badge here because frankly I sometimes forget which car I'm driving, and at least the badge helps me to remember. Now, in terms of interior details, objectively, some materials in this car do feel a little bit better. The fabric upholstery on the seats, for example, in this car do feel a little bit higher quality in that they are softer to the touch than what you get in the Alza, although the Alza is available with a gear-up package which can cover these seats in leather should you want them. I do not believe that is an option for the Veloz. You also get 3 pieces of hardware or tech in here that you don't get in the Alza, and that is wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is alright. You get single zone climate control in here, although weirdly you can't change the direction of the airflow, which I think is very odd. And you also get a wireless charger here. Now, this wireless charger I actually think is a bit of a hit and miss because I appreciate that it's there and it works with the fact that you have wireless Android Auto. So I can put my phone here and my phone will connect wirelessly and charge while I drive without having to faff about with wires, which is especially useful because the USB port is all the way up here, which means you have an ugly wire dangling. The trouble is, in order to put the wireless charger here, they've had to remove the lock and unlock button that you would find here in the Alza. So instead you have to lock and unlock from the door. Again, I know it seems small, but having to look for it, and also this is not a particularly nice action to do when you're trying to lock and unlock the doors, and it's just a little bit odd to me. What doesn't strike me as odd, however, is the digital instrument cluster, because this is very familiar with anyone who's driven a modern Perodua, or some of them slightly cheaper Toyotas, because the interface is very familiar, it's very easy to use, it is decently customizable, and you get all the information that you need here. The steering wheel is also very familiar because the design is exactly the same, and so you'll find the buttons for your adaptive cruise control and other level 2 semi-autonomous features on this side, and it all generally works quite well. Now, in terms of comfort, there's one thing that this car does that the Alza doesn't. Because you see, in a Perodua, you can adjust the steering wheel like this. In a Toyota, you can also do this. Again, it may seem very minor, but if you are looking at a car like this to drive over longer distances, having just the right seating position makes life so much better. And that basically is it. There are no other upgrades in here, which means in terms of practicality, you enjoy the same amount of space in the back that is still as versatile as you could find in that other car that I keep mentioning. I don't think Toyota is going to like this review very much. Now, putting people in the back, you will find that these seats are mounted quite high, which means I can actually tuck my feet in quite close to me like this in order to maximize legroom, which would be very helpful if there were people in the third row and I need to pull the seat all the way here. Now, because the back of the front seats are scalloped and they sit quite high, I can tuck my feet in underneath and I still have a decent amount of knee room while providing enough legroom for the third row. But of course, if there's nobody back there, I can push this all the way back here. I'm going to move this seat so you can see, and you can see that in this position I have absolutely acres of knee room. I do like the fact that you have a couple of USB ports down there and a single central cup holder, which might seem like a bad thing until you realize that there's also a bottle holder here and a bottle holder in the door, ensuring that people back here have plenty of space to put their things. You also get these multitude of pockets on the back of the seats, ensuring that everybody has space to put their stuff. And of course, the big upgrade with the Veloz over the Avanza is the fact that you now get proper air conditioning blowers back here, which are strong enough to cool all the way to the third row. I can attest to this because I put something cold in the back and then I put that there and then it stayed cold. It works now, just take my word for it. Now, in terms of mounting child seats back here, the doors open very, very wide, and so even a large car seat shouldn't be too much of a problem. And of course, the ISOFIX tethers here are very, very easy to locate, which means putting a large car seat shouldn't be too much of a hassle. Although, of course, if you'd prefer to use this simply for adult passengers, you'll be able to enjoy the fact that these seats recline quite some ways, which means I could, for example, take a nap if I should so want to. And of course, if you only have 2 passengers back here, you also have the option of deploying this as a center armrest, which admittedly does make this car feel very comfortable. Now, in terms of the third row, which I'm not going to get into, it's quite usable for a car this small. As an adult, at about 165 centimeters, I think I am, I don't know, it depends on the weather, I can actually sit back there relatively comfortably. Of course, my knees are quite high, which means my underthighs are not very well supported, so I could only probably sit back there for about an hour and a half at most. But at least back there I still have cup holders, I still have a power point should I need it, which means living back there is really not that bad. And if you're using your Alza to put small children in the back, you know, the ones that are old enough to not have to sit in car seats because there are no ISOFIX mounts in the third row, they could live there for quite some time. So you could put your parents here, for example, and your children in the back, and then this becomes a perfect road trip machine. For short road trips, of course, not too long, because even children back there might not be too comfortable. And ultimately, you can tell that this is a big upgrade, again, over the Avanza that this car is effectively replaces. And compared to vehicles like the Honda BR-V, I do believe that the interior build quality and technology does blow the Honda out of the water. And of course, compared to the Mitsubishi Xpander, there are far more things in here than you would get in that particular car. Though that said, I feel like compared to the Honda and the Mitsubishi, this car's biggest draw is actually the way it drives. So, without further ado, now when I first drove the Veloz, I was thinking, you know, for the extra cost involved here, perhaps there were some changes under the skin that Toyota is not telling us about that may make this car feel a little bit more premium. But as I said at the beginning of this video, a lot of this car is very similar to what we've seen from the Perodua Alza and is also very similar to what else you get on the market from Honda and Mitsubishi. So under the bonnet is a 1.5-litre VVTi petrol engine paired to a DCVT or dual CVT automatic gearbox with power going to the front wheels. In terms of horsepower and torque, it is adequate. It's not about to set your heart on fire, but then again, very few MPVs could anyway. And as far as I'm concerned, this powertrain combination means that this car is very suited for town driving because it quite likes sort of bumbling about at speed sort of below 80 kilometers an hour, and that's kind of where it's happiest. Fuel consumption is also pretty good when you're doing that too. We've driven this car about 600 kilometers, it's averaged about 14 and a half kilometers per litre, which notably is about 2 kilometers per litre less than the Perodua Alza. We suspect that that is down to the larger alloy wheels. But out on the road, honestly, you can barely tell a difference between the two cars. The engine is nicely muted, although it isn't the quietest thing in the world, but I will admit that it is quite smooth, although when accelerating hard, for example, it can make itself known. But if you're driving at around 100, 110 thereabouts, it's nicely damped, and so it doesn't really bother the way you go about your business that much. And of course, because this car runs electric power steering, it does mean that the weight varies depending on the speed you're driving. So when you're driving at lower speeds, like when you're parking or you're driving around town, the steering wheel is nice and light. And then of course, as you speed up, the steering wheel gets a little bit heavier. Naturally, if you're looking for any sort of communication from the steering wheel, then not only should you not be looking at a Toyota Veloz, you shouldn't be really shopping in this segment anyway. But it is reassuring and it's very easy to use, and that's kind of what you want out of a car like this. And what makes life a little bit easier in a car like this, specifically the Veloz, is the fact that you have a lot of active safety available to you. Now, the Mitsubishi Xpander and the Honda BR-V both lack the sort of things that this car comes with. Although they may have things like blind spot monitoring and a 360-degree camera, they don't have things like autonomous emergency braking or adaptive cruise control or lane tracing assist or lane centering for that matter. And so, if given a choice of a non-national compact MPV to shuttle a family about in, I would most likely pick a car like this, because active safety is something that's very important to me, and I've no doubt is very important to a lot of families out there. Comfort is also a very big factor to consider, and while the Veloz is certainly very comfortable, it rides very confidently over lumps and bumps, and it maintains body roll and body control decently well when you're driving quickly, although again, this is certainly no sports car. But I have this sneaking suspicion that the larger alloy wheels do compromise primary ride ever so slightly. Additionally, it does mean that you get a little bit more road roar than you would get from the 16-inch alloy wheels in the Perodua Alza, although in terms of interior refinement, this car is right up there with the Mitsubishi Xpander and the Honda BR-V, although the Xpander is known to be a little bit noisier at motorway speeds owing to the fact that it runs an archaic 4-speed automatic gearbox. And that sort of sums up what I think about the Veloz. I don't think that it is necessarily 20,000 ringgit more worth it than a Perodua Alza, because the Alza just comes far too close to the Veloz in terms of its appeal, in terms of its specifications, driving dynamics, and so on, because these are ultimately the same cars under the skin. But I do think that if you really don't want a national car for whatever weird reason, and you are cross-shopping the Veloz compared to the Mitsubishi Xpander and the Honda BR-V, I think you'll be very well served in this car. It's very practical, it's very versatile in terms of how you can set up the seats and how much stuff you can carry, and in terms of safety, this car is very comprehensively equipped, and that's what families look for. And in terms of fuel economy, sure, 14.2 could be better, but it's certainly still considered a frugal car. And because of that unlimited mileage warranty, it means that you and your family are free to go on adventures anytime you'd like without having to be too concerned about your car. And that is a unique advantage that the Veloz has over the Perodua Alza and the Honda BR-V and Mitsubishi Xpander. It means that this car is built and certified tough. So you can drive this anywhere. Go anywhere, do anything, anytime you want, and you will have that reassuring badge of safety because it is a Toyota. Would I recommend the Veloz? Absolutely, especially if you are a family, a smallish family that only need a couple of seats sometimes. If you're using the third row very regularly, perhaps you might need a bigger car. But as far as I'm concerned, as a compact 7-seater, the Veloz is quite hard to fault. Although, if you are looking at a Veloz and you can wait 3 more months for your car, consider saving a bit of money and getting a Perodua Alza instead. Because beyond the badge, the Alza is the best car that Perodua has ever come up with, full stop. And because of that, it means that you're getting an absolutely fantastic car for the money. But if you really want to be rid of a Perodua badge from your life for whatever weird traumatic reasons you might have, then the Veloz is a perfectly acceptable car. Normally, I would say that if you want a driver's car, or if you want something that's bigger, here are some other options, but actually there are not really any other options. The Honda BR-V is no better to drive, the Mitsubishi Xpander is no larger for carrying people and things, and so this is a good car. And did I mention that warranty yet? Could be a drinking game at this point. But it's just a good car. And it's refreshing to be in a good car. I feel like it's been a while. In any case, that's been our review of the Toyota Veloz. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and Happy New Year.